People think they know Joan of Arc's story, the saint, the warrior, the fire. But there are stories hidden in plain sight that are more mysterious than her legend. On Joan's 614th birthday, we officially launch the Hidden Heroines of History podcast, and we explore her story. Historian Christine Guidry Law joins us to reveal a side of Joan not widely known, how she inspired people during World War II, and why she's still relevant today. Awaken the past, discover the truth. This is Hidden Heroines of History. The past isn't silent, it's buried. Welcome to Hidden Heroines of History. I'm your host, Gayvin Powers, a published author, award-winning screenwriter, and storyteller who brings women's history to life. Today, I'm so excited because we have Christine Guidry Law joining us. She's a writer, editor, historian, and cultural activist dedicated to preserving history and honoring the past. She's a retired award-winning history teacher and currently serves as the executive director of the historic Union Library of Hatboro, Pennsylvania. She's also a dedicated advocate for U.S. veterans and a cultural ambassador for both the Acadian and Mi'kmaq people. She's an active member of Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History, the 80th Division Blue Ridge Veterans Association, the Battle of the Bulge Association, the Authors Guild, and Historical Writers of America. Christine is currently on submission with a narrative nonfiction manuscript exploring her grandfather's World War II experience and the lasting effects of battle trauma across generations. Let's go ahead and welcome Christine. Welcome, Christine. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I have loved following your journey as a writer and you as a historian. So I'm very excited to hear all about your work on your grandfather's book, your work, and how that ties into Joan of Arc, because we're going to be talking about Joan of Arc today. And she is our main person for January, and she's pretty stellar. And it's amazing how after so many hundreds of years that she's still coming up in our daily lives. And she even has an effect on you and the story with your grandfather. So would you like to share with our listeners how you have this tie into Joan of Arc in the first place?
Sure. So, I grew up in a very small South Louisiana Cajun town, more of like a village, in a very traditional Cajun Catholic family. And Joan of Arc is the patron saint of France and soldiers, prisoners, anybody really looking for courage. And so, our people in my family, we always knew Joan. We always kind of held Joan as, especially for the women, in that culture that goes through so much. We always held Joan as our kind of our role model, and it's just a special little role model and icon for me. And then as I was writing my book, she kind of fit in there too. Joan, as I said, is the patron saint of France, and our people were French, going all the way back to France a long time ago. Um, and so she is also the patron saint of soldiers. And my book is about my grandfather's experience with World War II and how he came home and his little village really didn't understand what he had done in the war. He wasn't missing a limb. He wasn't shot in an injury where you could see. His wounds were not visible. They were more in his spine. And of course, he had PTSD as well. So his village labeled him a coward. And the book is all about my 50 years of research and efforts to reclaim his honor and clear his name, which I ended up doing. And she was just, for me, going through all of that and having to step into a man's world. A lot of my research was done at my mom's knee when I was a little girl. That's where it started. And back then, especially, the doors were closed, especially women asking questions. So Joan was always kind of there as a role model. You know, she never gave up. She always stood for her values. She never let a man tell her what she couldn't do. And so she was just that patron saint of courage as I was going through this journey, even more so once I fully learned as an adult what she had done and who she was. by doing my own research on her.
And it sounds like she inspired you from what I'm hearing you say, and she gave you the courage to find out more and to stand up for your grandfather when he couldn't stand up for himself, it sounds like.
Exactly, and that's what Joan did. Joan was standing up, for herself, but she was also fulfilling a mission, and she was standing up for the people who couldn't stand up for themselves at the time. She was there to assist the Dauphin, Charles VII, to become King of France, and which would never have happened without Joan.
Absolutely. And so, thank you so much for sharing about how you first learned about her and the importance of her being in your family. I mean, that's amazing going back all that way. And it's kind of funny how well, it's not really funny, but it's just ironic how something seeming so small, a patron saint of soldiers and courage growing up, and then has such a great influence on your life later on as you go through your adventures and discover other elements about your family in the past. It's amazing how everything kind of comes full circle
It
sometimes.
does, it comes full circle. It's just amazing how you forget about those things, and, the things that you grow up with, you take for granted, and they're always there, and so you don't really think about them until something out of the ordinary or unusual happens or unexpected, and then you're like, "Oh,
Mhm.
there she is.
Right. Like she'd been there all along.
She's been there all along." Yep,
Yeah,
all along.
yeah. Why do you think Joan was forgotten over the centuries and during her time?
I think that Joan, she was forgotten, but she wasn't so much forgotten as she was deliberately diminished because
Uh-huh,
her story disrupted power at the time.
uh-huh,
And she was just a poor peasant girl. She was illiterate. She could only sign her name, what her mother had taught her. And she claimed to have divine authority in a world that was controlled by men,
uh-huh,
church hierarchy, and even the monarchy at the time. Here comes this 13-year-old girl, claiming divine power. And, I was told to do this. And they're like, well, who are you? But it became easier to just erase her humanity. And if they erase her humanity, then they can erase the responsibility for what was done to her.
uh-huh,
It was an awful thing done to her, and history often forgets the women who don't fit safely into that obedience term, the
uh-huh,
women who don't just do what is expected of them and obey, and Joan certainly was not going to obey anyone but her God,
uh-huh. Which is powerful.
which is very powerful, and very much so even to this day, women who don't fit that, that normal societal image of what a woman should be. You
Uh-huh,
know, if you are a confident woman, you are labeled as everything but confident because you become a threat to authority.
uh-huh,
And so that's kind of what I've in my own life, what I've learned. And so it just kind of goes back to looking at where are our role models that were able to overcome those things that held us back as
uh-huh.
women. Not that I'm a diehard feminist here, but
Mhm.
there are some things to be said for those women who had the courage to stand up for what they believed in and to move forward against all odds and especially the norms of their time,
Yeah,
like Joan did.
absolutely. And I love how you brought that back into modern women because I do think that she's relevant today. And like I said, she's coming into your book that you're writing about your grandfather. You're going to explain a little bit later to us just about how that happens. But could you talk a little bit more about why you think she's still relevant for modern women today?
Yeah, she trusted her inner authority, and
Uh-huh,
especially in today's world,
uh-huh,
we have this shift
uh-huh,
into women empowering women,
uh-huh,
and to believe in yourself and to believe that against all what society says, we are each have our own talents. We're each unique in our own way, and we have something to offer no matter what walk of life we come from, no matter what our circumstances are. Joan made decisions based on conviction rather than permission. She didn't wait for someone to give her permission to fulfill her destiny. She had conviction, and that conviction drove every decision that she made and every action that she fulfilled. She rejected the gender roles. I'll talk about that later
uh-huh,
as well. She totally rejected the roles. She was tried for
uh-huh,
it long before she was tried at her trial where she was murdered.
uh-huh,
She refused to recant she would not recant her truth even under the threat of death.
uh-huh,
Today, women are still punished for their confidence, for their intuition, for their spiritual authority.
uh-huh.
So I think that Joan remains deeply relevant in those cases because she really does embody the cost and even the necessity of believing in yourself,
Mhm.
and to the point where it cost her her life, to believe in herself. And she was 13 years old. She was still a child. Well,
Mhm.
in what we feel is a child in today's world. In her world, in those times, she was ready to be married,
Mhm.
but still, just that little bit of time from age 13 to 19, she accomplished a tremendous thing that is mainly forgotten in history.
Mhm.
Unless you know about Joan, unless you were raised in her faith, you may not even know about her or what she really did. It may be a questionable thing of, oh yeah, Joan of Arc, she was known for something. Oh yeah, she wore armor, she dressed like a man. But there was so much more, and she really embodied that cost of believing in yourself to her death. It cost her her life.
Mhm.
And I just feel like if this young girl, can have that much conviction and believing in herself and what she was destined to do, then we should, as modern women, should take note of that. And we shouldn't shy away from our own beliefs and our own convictions.
I agree. I love everything that you're saying here. Do you have a special story that you had growing up or hearing your grandmother, your mother, someone in your family talking about Joan of Arc that sort of has stuck with you all these years?
I think that for me, she was just always there. It was
Mhm.
if you needed courage, you prayed and you asked Saint Joan of Arc to intercede and pray with you. That's kind of how it went when you were growing up. But for me, as I was growing up, I was going to school and I was becoming learning how to research and becoming a researcher and just really interested in all of these things that were kind of a different thing, a different or just different. I was just just different. We'll just put it like that. And for me, she was always this icon. She was always this, just like this symbol. And until I got to where I started to do my own research for a project. And then I got to really research her, read her
Mhm.
transcripts, read her letters. She dictated a lot of her letters to her priest or to her aide. And then it became real. It's like, oh, this really did happen. Oh, like most of our historical icons, when you go back and you read their life and what they really did when through their eyes, then it becomes real. It's like, oh, this was a real person. This really did happen, and look what
Mhm.
she did, and it just brought it to life for me. And then of course I went to France and something amazing happened there. I was reintroduced to Joan in a different way. So last September, I was asked to go to France to represent the veteran associations that I'm involved with. And I was going to represent them at many of the 80th anniversary of World War II, the ceremonies being held.
Mhm.
And I was honoring my grandfather
Mhm.
at the time, coming full circle in clearing his name and reclaiming his honor. And so while I was there, I was staying with the president of the Lorraine Valley War Memorial Association in Toul, France, which is in the Lorraine Valley. And he took me to the Cathedral of Saint Etienne.
Mhm.
I really wanted to see it because this was a town that my grandfather's unit liberated, and so they were taking me everywhere that he would have been and what he would have seen, and I really wanted to go to the cathedral because my grandfather was just a big icon of faith to me. So we went to the cathedral, and they're giving me this beautiful tour, and my husband's with me, and he doesn't. Even though we've been married for 30 something years, he does not speak a lick of French. I did, and I could understand, but they got him an English interpreter. And so we're doing this tour, and they don't say anything about
Mhm.
Joan. But I walk by, and there's this huge little alcove and this big statue, and I'm just kind of looking at it. And I was like, that is Joan of Arc. And the lady says, "Why, yes, it is." And she says, "Oh, I guess it's just understood that everybody knows this about this place, but
Mhm.
this church right outside the door is where one of Joan's trials was held." What do you mean? Wait, back up a minute,
Mhm.
because she had no idea what Joan meant to me and how I
Mhm.
knew that this was Joan of Arc. I was like, "What? What do you mean?" No, and she says, "This, many people know, and I guess I took it for granted, but this is right outside the door of this cathedral is where Joan of Arc had one of her trials." And I was like, "What are you talking about? Wait, back up a minute." because she had no idea of knowing what Joan meant to me and how I knew this was Joan of Arc.
Mm.
And so we start to talk, and she's like, "Yeah, right outside the door when Joan was going to go, when she got her calling, and she was adamant that she was going to go to the Dauphin, and she was going to tell him what her mission was and that she was being told what she was being told to do. And her father wanted her to stay and marry. And so this young man from the village claimed that she had agreed to marry him. And it was against the law at the time to break an engagement, to break a betrothal. It was against the law. So she was brought to trial. Yes, she was.
What?
Today, we can just change our mind today. But Joan couldn't do that. It was
Wow.
She was brought to trial. And so it came to trial, and the trial was held right there, right outside the Cathedral of Saint Etienne in the courtyard. And there's a plaque there that memorializes this trial. And her family did not stand up for her. They stood up for the young man. And so she was able, by God's grace, she was able to defend herself, and she won the trial.
Wow.
She did not have to marry him, because if she would have lost the trial, she would have either had to marry him or she would have been imprisoned because she was breaking the law. So she did not have the option to say, no, I changed my mind or whatever. Like we can get engaged today and say, oh, he's a loser. No, this is not working. I'm breaking the engagement. But she didn't have that luxury. So she had to prove that she had never said yes in the first place and she was not engaged to him. And the burden of proof was on her.
That's amazing. And can we just pause for just a second? Because this is the 1400s. And
This
to
is the
be able
1400s.
to actually beat a trial where everything is stacked up against you, I mean, the odds are definitely not in your favor.
No, no, they're not in your favor, and I thought that was amazing because we always
Right.
hear the story of her going into battle and fighting, like a soldier and not giving up. If you are looking into Joan's life, that's what's told. But this particular story is never told. I
Mm-mm.
was fascinating. I learned something new that day, and I was just fascinated, and it just made me really honor her even more, even more so, especially coming from the background and the culture that I came from. Because when I was growing up, a woman's place was in the home, and it's this little pocket of Cajun land, and the woman's place was in the home, and you got married, and you had children, you had lots of children, and that was your place. And
Mhm.
I broke that, and I went against the norm, and a little bit ostracized for it. And I went off. I left the town. I married someone from the outside, and I went off and got an education, which was
Mhm.
not what I was supposed to do. I was not obedient.
No, you weren't at, and that can actually be seen dangerous in modern times. And just like it was seen dangerous in Joan's time to really deviate against what's expected for you to do growing up. So it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of conviction
Mhm.
to go ahead and stand against the grain and say, no, this is my truth. This is who I am. And this is what I'm doing. So I
And look at
love.
the time span. Joan,
Mhm.
like you said, 1800s. We're in 2025, getting ready to be in 2026, and we are still declared dangerous for doing that.
Right. Which is wild to me. Completely
Crazy.
wild. Yeah. Okay, we just talked about how you need to have courage, you need to have belief. You have to have a definite sense of self, and you had mentioned that your grandfather had a lot of faith, and we talked about intuition being suppressed. As you were writing your grandfather's story, were there any stories that landed harder with you or truer for you in terms of intuition or faith that really sort of brought a different light on his journey or Joan's journey or even your journey that you'd like to share?
For us, it all ties into faith because my
Mhm.
grandfather, I come from a long line of Tretas, and the Treta is like a faith healer. And so when my grandfather went off to war, he had to, learn to kill men versus heal men. And that was a very big thing for him. And the faith, just keeping the faith. And for me, through my life and everything that I have done, it has been that faith,
Mhm.
that divine faith that has kept me going. And I've attributed a lot of the things that I've gone through and surviving a lot of the things that I've gone through to my faith. Had I not had that strong conviction of faith instilled in me as a child, I would not have made it through a lot of the things that I made it through.
Mhm.
And while I was writing the book, it was very difficult to find a fine line between showing that faith and that intuition that he had and the gift that he had,
Mhm.
and making sure that that conviction, that gift
Mhm.
was not seen in a way that was like disrespectful or
Mhm.
dishonoring my heritage. You know, I didn't want to dishonor my heritage or my faith or him in any way, but just walking that fine line into what the gift is and what he did and our people do versus people believing that it's fake or magic or voodoo or something like that.
Mhm.
So it just, the conviction helped, when you read Joan's story and her conviction of faith and how she's at 13, she heard voices. Well, today at 13, if you hear voices, you're going into a padded room,
Mhm.
and you're
Mhm.
probably not gonna come out, you know? So, she heard voices and the voices got stronger and she recognized
Mhm.
voices as Saint Michael and Saint Catherine and Saint Margaret, and she was just filled with passion and divine conviction that this was her destiny. This was what she was
Mhm.
God was leading her to do this. This was
Mhm.
her mission.
Mhm.
And so that kind of stayed with me as I was writing the book because I am a writer, but I never planned to write this story.
Mhm.
This was a personal vow to my family, to him, for my mom, for my family, for me to do this, I knew my grandfather was not what the town thought he was. I knew it deep down in my bones. I knew it.
Mhm.
And my mom always told me, "Oh, I was born very early with some horrible issues at a time where medical technology was not what it is today, and it was my grandfather." I attribute my um my mindset, my ability to walk, talk, think, all of that, I attribute it to my grandfather treating me as a baby and showing my mom what to do. I would be a crippled. The doctor said I was brain damaged. They told my
Mhm.
mom I would be brain damaged. I would be better off if she'd just let me die.
My
And my
goodness.
grandfather was the one who I firmly believe saved me. And
Mhm.
so my it kinda in turn, she always said, "God saved you for a purpose," there is a purpose, and I just felt as I was writing the book and doing this, that this was my purpose, was he
Mhm.
saved me, so I'm gonna save him in a way, and so Joan's story kind of became real, especially when I was in that church and they were telling me this story, and I thought, "This
Mhm.
is crazy," because it was mirroring my journey and my story, and, it became the book was written because of a vow I made,
Mhm.
and the vow became very real, the promise was very real, and it almost almost became an obsession to do this, and so as I'm writing the book, it that conviction just became stronger and stronger and gave me the courage
Mhm.
to persevere,
Mhm.
and it's a very fine line when you're writing something like that to make sure that everyone that is written about, you maintain the dignity of those people.
Yes, yes, I agree. I got chills as you were talking about it, and I was thinking while you were saying it also, we were on the same brainwave there while you were saying that he had saved you as a child, and I just wanna reiterate, it does seem like this again is another full circle moment where you are giving life back to him, you are saving him in some way and giving him the dignity that he didn't have, but he deserved
Mhm.
by writing this story, which is
Yeah.
really powerful.
I think so. It's taken me a long time to get to that point to to look at it that way,
Mhm.
because when I first started writing the book, it was a totally different book. And
Mhm.
now, with my agent and editors and getting to the point where it's going to go into print, it's transformed in a totally different way than I thought it would.
Mhm.
And so it's taken a lot of that Joan of Arc courage to convince me to do it and to expose parts of myself that I did not want to expose at all. I really wanted it to be his story. But
Mhm.
along the way, it became our story.
I agree. I think that any writer who truly involves themselves into a piece that they're writing, there's always elements of them that they bring to the story. It's almost impossible to not have parts of yourself in the story because you're so connected to it as you write it. And it seems
Right.
to me also that when you were a baby and he was healing you as a baby, that, came from a place of love.
Mhm.
And then as you got to know him, obviously that love develops in the relationship. And I do believe that you had mentioned that he had passed away on your seventh birthday. And now it also seems to me that this is really a journey of love for you, giving that back to him,
It really
created
is.
created from all of that.
It really is. The trip that I made, I was able to honor him and his unit, and, we unveiled a monument that had never been done in
Uh,
the town to his unit, and, the French government had been denying the request
uh,
of the association, this French association, to honor this unit and to have a monument. And so they wrote one more time and said, "We have a descendant coming," and they agreed and said, "We will do this under one condition: she has to be the one to unveil it." And that was like a full circle moment, with the shadow of the Cathedral of Saint Etienne in the background, like overlooking the town, and so it was amazing. It was just an amazing thing, and it's just it's been a long journey, and it was, 50 years to the day. Last April was 50 years, since his death. That was kind of amazing, the
mhm.
50th anniversary, and it just kind of all came into place. So, I got my agent, and we started to, move into print, and so it's been a long journey, and, it's been a long harrowing journey that took a lot of patience and courage.
Yes, for sure, and I've been on the outside seeing some of that journey, and I know you've been through it, so I'm really happy for you.
Yes, yes, I will be, happy to move on to the next book.
Absolutely. I'm excited for you about all of that. So is there anything you'd like to share about, the courage and what you uncovered, or any little teaser you'd like to share that might tie back to Joan of Arc? You've given us some beautiful, I would say serendipitous, but I would also say divine moments that have occurred on your journey with all of this. And when I
Yeah, it's
see
very
things,
yeah,
yes, when I see things like that happen, I think, okay, that you're on the right path. You see
yeah.
those little divine moments pop up.
Of him along the way. I often say that he wrote this book for me. He
Mhm,
was always there because I have done a lot of research. If you could see my all the research, and every time I would write something that I was unsure of, I would write a scene. It's a narrative nonfiction, so it's told like a story with true
mhm,
facts. And
mhm,
every time I would write something that I was just not sure of, within a day or so, something would happen that would prove what I wrote, that what I was questioning.
mhm,
Maybe this is, did this really happen this way? Am I putting too much of myself into it? And then something would happen, and there it would be. I would
mhm.
see it in writing, or it would just kind of happen. Like what happened when I went to France. There I was in France, where I discovered so much, and I don't want to tell it all because it'll ruin the book. And this will be put out there before the book is. So I
Right.
don't want to
No, we
spoil.
don't wanna do any spoilers,
We don't
but
want to do any spoilers. I will just say that he was forgotten, much like Joan was.
mhm,
And I thought it was very serendipitous, the trip to Saint Etienne, but even more so that Joan grew up, her home is not far from that town where he was, and where his courage and his bravery came into the light, and, he
mhm.
is seen as a hero there, and, that's all I can say because it really will spoil the book.
Okay. We don't wanna spoil the book.
But I thought all these little signs that would just happen. I really didn't see Joan as one of them until I got to France, and it was always
Mhm,
that was always like a bucket list thing. I never really put Joan into that and
mhm.
that courage until I was there at the cathedral, and they told me the story, and I'm standing in that very same spot. And I'm like, holy, excuse my language, holy crap, I'm standing in the very spot that St. Joan of Arc stood in. Like, this is crazy. And then they said, well, her home is just not far from here if you want to go and see it. What? Of course, my historian of heart, I'm like, yeah, right now, let's go.
That's incredible. Did you see her? You had to have seen her home, right?
Yeah, it's
What did
just
you think of it?
she was just a little peasant farm girl. Of course, 1400s is a different look in France than when I was growing up in the 70s in South Louisiana. But
Mhm,
if you take if you just take the principle of the thing, we could have been the same, living in the same type of village. I mean, it was just a little French farm village, and when I was growing up, it was pretty much the same, in South Louisiana with the French. And when I went to into those parts of France, it was like being home because the people spoke
Mm,
the countryside, not Paris, but in the countryside, they spoke like us, they had the
mhm,
same we could speak French, I could understand them, and just looking at the beauty of what was there and how my grandfather probably saw it as total destruction, and
mhm,
now I'm looking at this beautiful areas, and they know that you're an American and you're there what you're doing there. They're just so thankful still to this day. And so many, especially when I went on into Luxembourg and different areas, they were always people there that were young people that would thank me for what our people did. They would thank you for so much. We don't want to ever forget the liberators. It was just very moving and very emotional. And I thought, wow, every young person should have to do this in their life. Every
mhm,
American should have to come here
mhm,
overseas and see just what it meant for what our soldiers did. And
mhm.
it was just, when so much of our history is being erased, you can read it in a history book, you can see it in the movies all day long, but until you walk that ground, you don't fully understand the sacrifice and the courage that it took for us to be able to sit here right here and talk about it
Mhm,
like this.
mhm. It does, and it's so important to know our history because like that old saying is, "If you don't remember your history, you're bound to repeat it," and
Mhm.
so being able to learn it, experience it, I do believe the same as you, seeing it firsthand is very different than reading about it. We can use our imaginations, but actually walking the ground where it happened, walking through
Mhm.
Verdun, Flanders Fields, in
Mhm.
World War One, going to World War II, to Battle of the Bulge, going through the concentration camps, to
Mhm.
experience that firsthand gives you a completely different experience than just reading about it. So it is important to have those experiences, I agree.
Absolutely. And if you are um fortunate enough to have that opportunity, take it.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. Also, I will say to tie back into the serendipity of all of this, I actually was gonna ask you to come on and talk about a different person, a different woman in history, and last minute, I just said, "No, no, no, just ask her about Joan of Arc," and I don't know why, don't know what encouraged me to do that, kind of like us both showing up in the same color sweaters today. We must have
That
gotten
was
the message.
Dupre. That's how he works, Dupre's like, "Put that little bug in your ear. We have to talk about a French woman."
Yes, exactly. I mean, I was literally writing the email to you to choose someone else, and then I said, "No, we'll do Joan of Arc." "Okay, just send it off." And then you said, "Oh, Joan of Arc actually plays a big part in this story I'm writing." Like, well, that is how it all works, so I'm going with it.
There
So
you go. There you go.
that's wonderful.
Exactly. Her birthday's coming up, and, it's
Absolutely.
just the
Yeah,
perfect time to start a new year
it is.
with
It is.
courage.
Is there oh, pardon me. Go ahead.
No, that's it.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add about this, about Joan of Arc, about your story, about your journey as a writer? Anything?
I think it's really important for especially for young girls to hear, Joan of Arc wasn't perfect. She that's what makes her so powerful. She
Mhm,
wasn't perfect. She wasn't this all-powerful, confident, well-made, wealthy woman. She was a 13-year-old poor peasant girl from nowhere,
mhm.
and she made mistakes. She had to figure out how to do what was being asked of her in a time where everybody was against her. Like, who goes and says, I've been told to come here and save this kingdom and I'm going to crown you king? And, who does that? Well, Joan did. But, so she was young, she was stubborn, she was
Mhm,
faithful, but she was unyielding. Nothing swayed her. She knew her destiny, she knew her course, and she stayed her course no matter what. She never veered from what she believed in, no matter what the consequences were, no matter how many mistakes she might make. 'Cause she wasn't perfect. We all see the end game and, what history tells us is the good parts, but really, it wasn't a beautiful, flowery journey
mm-mm,
like in the motion pictures, they always make it look so beautiful.
mhm,
Of course, the end game was beautiful. The outcome was great for um her fulfilling her destiny. Dauphin King, Charles did become King of France, and it did turn the Hundred Years' War. So yes, she accomplished her goal, but at what cost? She lost her life, you know?
Mhm.
So she made history not because she was invincible and not because, she was this, beautiful, powerful person at the
Mhm.
time. She made history because she refused to abandon herself. She, in a world that, we talked about this earlier, in a world that still burns women for certainty,
Mhm.
Joan remains a warning and a guide, a reminder that courage often looks like standing alone, but she
Mhm.
wasn't alone, you
Right.
know. And a lot of times on my own journey, I have felt very alone, very isolated for the things that I believed in, and because I continued down this journey, down this walk, and I have often felt alone, but I know that I'm not alone because I have my deep faith, and I think that Joan, no matter what your faith is, no
Uh-huh.
matter what religious beliefs you have, Joan
Mhm.
is a great role model for our young girls to just look deep within themselves and be able to hold the convictions of what they believe in, no matter what the world tells them to believe in.
That's an amazing, amazing gift that she gave just by
Mhm.
being herself, and it's an amazing gift that you're sharing to all of our listeners just
Thank
by
you.
repeating that. Yeah, absolutely, and it is true. I understand, I empathize because I've many times felt alone myself, being
Mhm.
a woman, being a writer, my own journey, and I do think that being who you are is it's non-negotiable in life. If you wanna be happy, it's a harder path, but it's a so much better path. It's just a much happier,
Mhm.
blissful, content path to truly be who you are, and I think she gives us that gift, and I think you're reminding us of that, so thank you for sharing that.
Well, thank you for having me and
Yeah,
allowing me to share it.
absolutely. Should we toast to Joan and say happy
Let's toast to
birthday?
Joan.
Yes,
Happy
happy birthday,
birthday.
Joan, and we'll
Bon
cheers. There we
bon
go.
fête.
Cheers to Joan. Happy birthday. And thank you so much for joining me today, Christine. I wish you all the best with your story with your grandfather. I can't wait to read it. I
Thank
can't
you.
wait to have you back on again before the pre launch of it. And we'll
Absolutely.
talk about that. And maybe we'll get a few teasers that don't spoil the book, but we'll hold off until that happens. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed this, like, share, and subscribe. We have more amazing episodes planned. You can listen to them on the Hidden Heroines of History podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and iHeartRadio.